open it up.
Yeah, I have a broadcast button. What does that mean?
Yeah, we're starting it now.
Okay.
Okay, good morning, everyone. We're gonna give it a second or two here. I know sometimes coming in from the waiting room, getting audio connected, it can take a bit. So we'll give it a few seconds to allow people to get situated. Okay, I want to welcome everyone to this morning's ATTA webinar, How to Navigate Change, Summertime Fun with ASD. Your presenters for today will be Dr. Amy Julian and Tanner Crawford. But before I hand it over to them, I do want to take care of a few housekeeping items. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Brittany Boston, and I am with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support. So again, thank you for joining us. As a reminder, I want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded. So if you have to hop off in the middle, if life interrupts, or if you have a colleague or individual that you would like to share this webinar with, it will be uploaded to our ATTA website by the end of this week. And I will put the link to the website in the chat here momentarily. If you have a question or comment or information that you'd like to share throughout the presentation today, there is a few ways you can go about doing that. You can either type in the chat throughout the presentation, and I know our presenters will pause and answer any questions or refer to any comments that are in there. Or if you have a working microphone and would like to communicate with us that way, you have a little raise hand feature down at the bottom of your screen on your toolbar that you can click, and we will be able to unmute you to ask your question or share your information that way. And I believe that's all of the housekeeping items. And so with that, I am going to hand it over to Dr. Amy Julian.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Amy Julian, and I'm the director of the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support. And at our center, we have the Autism Training and Technical Assistance Project. And this is one of our monthly webinars. So every month we have different features around supporting individuals with autism as they transition into post-secondary of the workplace. The Autism Training and Technical Assistance Project develops and presents resources that assist individuals with autism in their transition from secondary education to post-secondary education, or from secondary education into employment. We provide training and support to important stakeholders, such as yourselves, as they work to provide an equitable experience for individuals on the spectrum. We are excited to have you with us today, and we invite you to visit our website, which Brittany's posted in the chat there, and look at additional resources that we have. ICSPS is the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support. We've been around since 1977. And really what we do is create, support, and deliver professional development for education professionals across Illinois. We provide technical assistance, develop publications, and facilitate program improvement strategies. Our big areas that we look at are college transition, recruitment, retention, and completion, and really encouraging the achievement of our learners across Illinois. We are housed in the Educational Administration and Foundations Department in the College of Education here at Illinois State University. This is our website, which again is in the chat there for you. And as I said, every month we have a webinar. We have had some fantastic speakers come in talking about college transition, talking about when to disclose, discussing the return on investment for employing individuals who are on the spectrum. So I really encourage you to check out that website when you get a minute, because there's some great resources there. Before we get started, let's take a little poll. Which region are you located in? So if you'd like to share, there's the poll. Which region are you located in?
Looks like we've actually got both questions on there. So we will ask about your region and then also the stakeholder that you represent. So secondary, students, young adults, etc.
Excellent. Thank you, Brittany. And if you're having trouble seeing those, just scroll on down.
I'll give it just one more second, as we do have a very intimate group today, which is always nice. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end our poll. So it looks like we have Chicago area and employers mainly with us today.
Fantastic. So as Brittany has said, our presenters for today are myself, Amy Julian. I'm the director for the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support. And also our primary presenter today is Tanner Crawford. And he works as the Workforce Innovation Coordinator at ICSPS, and he works with employers on a regular basis. So this will be a great presentation for those who are with you. I'm going to start with the objectives, and then I'm going to hand the floor over to Tanner. So what we're hoping that you will get out of today is we're going to define autism spectrum disorder. We're going to talk about helpful hints for transition to summer. We're going to talk about schedules, choice boards, and other visual aids that you can use to really enhance your students' experience. And we're going to talk about new skills and locations, and then safety tips for travel. So with that, I'd like to hand the floor over to Tanner, and I'll navigate.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us this morning. My name is Tanner Crawford, like Dr. Julian had introduced me. My background with working with autistic folks or individuals on the spectrum is I worked for several years as a direct support professional with autistic children and adults, as well as my youngest nephew is on the spectrum as well, and I was his primary caretaker. So I have spent a lot of years very close to those on the spectrum and spending as much time as possible to make their lives a little bit easier and try to help them get what they need. So we're going to start today with some real basics here. So the Autism Spectrum Disorder, I'm going to call it ASD from now on just because it's a lot shorter. So we'll get that out of the way right away. ASD is a neurological and developmental disorder that affects how folks interact with others, communicate, and learn. ASD does not discriminate, as many of us know. This is present in all types of people, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status, or any other identifier. Autism is present everywhere. One of my favorite quotes about autism is that once you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. And what this means is exactly what this third bullet point says. ASD is very individualized. No two people with autism are going to experience it the exact same way. Autism is on a spectrum, as the name indicates, which means that there is a range of abilities amongst autistic folks. It just depends on their specific setup, essentially. There are no trademark physical features of autism, and the ASD prevalence rate currently is still rising. The last time that it was taken 4 years ago, it was 1 in 68, and now it's 1 in 54 children. That's from the CDC. I am ready when you, there we go. So I wanted to talk about some common experiences for folks that have ASD, mainly because I think sometimes we know what it means, but we don't know what their everyday life looks like. And this will help us with the helpful hints to transition to summer. So one major experience that a lot of folks with ASD have is sensory overload. And I have a quote here: "A person who finds it difficult to process everyday sensory information can experience sensory overload or information overload." Really, it's just that your senses are getting too much information. So too much information can cause stress, anxiety, and possibly even physical pain. This is more common than you might think. This can result in withdrawal, distress behavior, or meltdowns. So this sensory overload comes from the fact that a lot of individuals with ASD have these heightened senses or hypersensitivity to a wide range of stimuli. So sensory overload does actually cause physical pain for several or for many folks on the spectrum. And if in sensory overload, the individual is not going to be able to respond to you in a way that you might see as, quote unquote, appropriate. They're in a state of crisis, essentially, in this sensory overload. So extra stress, commands, any kind of additional instruction is going to be very overwhelming for that person in sensory overload. So if you can avoid sensory overload, it can help prevent some of that distress that that person can feel, and also avoid what could lead to meltdowns. Some more common experiences: many folks on the spectrum must follow a specific routine. They might feel distressed by minor changes that seem insignificant to others. They experience senses much more intensely than others. We just covered that with sensory overload. And they repeat words and phrases over and over. And this is called echolalia. So echolalia can often present as repetition of quotes or catchphrases from favorite characters on TV or in the movies. But I also want you to remember that you could be that person's favorite character as well. So they could repeat what you say as well, which I would take as the compliment. Even good things can cause distress, though. When it comes to the routine, disruptions to the routine are very difficult for those folks. And even good things like a reward or going to a fun place, something that you would think they would enjoy may cause distress just because it disrupts that routine. So let's move on to helpful hints for the transition to summer. So I have in bold, make a plan, and it's so important that you do. Start preparing yourself and the individual on the spectrum prior to the end of the school year. So, a few weeks out, start talking to them about what's going to happen. There's also, you can do countdown to summer break. That way they know exactly how many days until things change for them. And things also start to change at school a lot of times towards the end of the year for, just as teachers are winding things down and, doing the final wrap up. So they'll already be experiencing changes before you think they might be. So talking to them a few weeks in advance and just laying it all out, hey, this is what's going on. Summer break is coming up and there's going to be a change in your routine. 9 times out of 10, those on the spectrum will do significantly better if they have the information. So answer any questions they may have about the change truthfully. Sugarcoating it will not help. They need to know the actual information and be aware of it so that they can prepare themselves for what's coming. And then the last one, utilize graduated exposure. And I'm about to explain that on the next slide. So graduated exposure is, just like the name says, the process of exposing an individual slowly and methodically to more and more aspects of a situation. So this is essential for folks on the spectrum. Graduated exposure helps the brain slowly adjust to new and different situations. The thing about ASD is that sometimes the processing time can be a little bit delayed, but then once they get it, they really get it. This is one of those experiences that could help them. If you slowly introduce, then they're more likely to pick up on it and they're more likely to be okay with it, and we alleviate any stress. This graduated exposure method is used very commonly in therapy for individuals on the spectrum. And an example of this, I'm just going to do a quick example, is if you're going to a new location, say you're going to a new park in town, you would tell the person on the spectrum about the park, everything you know, maybe look up some fun facts, show them any pictures that you might have or that might be on the internet. Give them a good idea of what this place even looks like and feels like before you get there. Then when you go to the place, go with no expectation. Don't even worry about getting out of the car. Maybe you drive through the park, you just show the sights. Doesn't have to be a big deal. And then the next time you would come back and you might get out for a few minutes, not very long, but a few minutes, maybe up to 10 or 15, whatever the person is comfortable with. And they may be comfortable at that point enough to stay and actually enjoy the park, but they may not be. And if they're not, you can come back again. And maybe next time you bring a task list, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, of specific things they can do at the park. And that way it gets their brain focused on that and they're busy exploring. And some of that anxiety about new places can be reduced. So that is graduated exposure for a new location, but it's obviously applicable to new experiences, locations, what have you. And then finally, I would say set up a schedule for summer. And this is so important because they lose that routine when they're coming out of school and into summer break. So creating a summer routine to replace it can help with that transition so they still have that structure. I would say make sure the schedule or calendar is presented in a way that it's easy for the person on the spectrum to process. And this means visual aids. They are so helpful when it comes to communicating with those on the spectrum because their brains are able to process that information a lot easier than auditory information most of the time. So I would also say, make sure that you include the person when you're making the schedule. Having a schedule made for you is good in some circumstances. Obviously, if it's a very young child that cannot help you, that's one thing. But this bullet point is geared more towards older individuals. If you allow them to help with their own schedule, this gives them a chance to contribute, and that's something that folks on the spectrum prefer to do, is contribute to what they're going to be doing and be aware of the changes before they occur. Okay, so why use visual aids? Visual aids are essential to effective communication with those on the spectrum. Visual aids are effective for all age ranges and cognitive levels. They increase engagement, they assist with processing, encourage social interaction, reduce sensory overload, a very big one, increase independence, introduce and develop new language. So visual aids are really an open door of communication that is, like I said, very essential to communication with the folks on the spectrum, as well as it makes things easier for those not on the spectrum as well. We use visual aids all the time and maybe don't think about it, but we're using them and they're super helpful to most human beings. So suggested uses for visual aids: conveying rules, showing schedules or calendars, showing the routine, which would fall in with the schedules, teaching a new task or skill, alleviate anxiety about a new situation. Like I said, showing them pictures, they've got that in their head now, and then support a calming strategy. So there are so many different uses for visual aids, and I'm going to go over a few different types of them now. So I think most people are very familiar with calendars and schedules. Everybody I know in the professional world is using a calendar to keep track of all their meetings, all of their goings on, even to remind themselves to check their email at the end of the day. This is the same concept for those on the spectrum. Having a visual of what your week or month is going to look like is a lot easier to prepare with than just the unknown. There's so many free PDFs online of kid-friendly calendars, of adult-friendly calendars for that matter as well. Summer activity calendars, even sometimes teachers will send home little summer calendars for activity ideas. Same with schedules. There's so many different options online. This is just about helping that routine stay constant and helping that person keep that structure through the summer.
So one of the things, Tanner, I'd like to add is that, and some of these look a little elementary, and some of you might be thinking, is that going to work for somebody who is going into like a high school or into post-secondary? So Tanner, do you feel that you should modify those, or do you feel that the visual aids are important?
I think it really depends on the person. Like I said
Okay.
before, every autistic person is different from the next one. So some of them are all about bright colors and would love the more elementary looking ones. Even I think some of the elementary looking ones are fun. And then others might like the more simple, like the one down here in the corner, the yellow calendar, or just color coded. Just really depends, I think, on the person.
Yeah, I'm a color-coded person, so I think it's fantastic with the color coding. And the other thing I wanted to make you aware of, not you as a presenter, but you as the audience, is that we're finding, and there's a lot of research being developed now, because we also have individuals who have anxiety, and some of the things, these helpful tips that we're using to talk about supporting individuals on the spectrum also support individuals with anxiety. So having those to-do lists, making sure that they know what's coming, making sure that they're comfortable, are all great tips, not only for your students, and I refer to everybody as students, so your students who are on the spectrum, but also for all your students and all your people who you have at home for summer. Sorry to interrupt. I'll move you on to types of virtual aids.
No, it was great information. Great information. So type of visual aids that if you have any experience with those on the spectrum that you might have run into before is a choice board. So a choice board is a great tool because it's a visual representation of items or activities that are available for the individual to choose from. And this is possible for anything. whether it's, you know, a reward, a choice board. They did something fantastic and they get to choose from this board what they would like as a prize, or even a self-soothing board. I'm very upset and I need to choose an activity to calm down with. Or, you know, just in general, they may say to you, oh, I'm bored, I have nothing to do. And you could use a choice board to say, you know, these are the 9 activities or 6 activities, however many are on there, that you can choose from. And I would advise here, if one of the choices is like weather dependent, to maybe cover that one. If you think that the individual would not be able to understand, okay, I can't go swimming if it's raining and storming, just very much depends on their level and how they interpret information. So if there are weather dependent ones, maybe cover those if you can. So choice boards are used to encourage communication. But like I said before, visual aids are essential to communication with those on the spectrum. And this is why they struggle so much sometimes with making small decisions, because there's so many options. Whereas if you narrow it down to a few that they can choose from and they have a visual, they can say, okay, yeah, I like the way that swimming looks today. I would like to do that. And it really opens up their ability to communicate with you. It encourages independent decision making, and it provides a visual reminder of the available choices. So once they have, you could list off 9 things, but they're not going to remember all 9 and it's going to be overwhelming for them. But if you show them a picture of them, then they have the time that they need to look at them and really make the choice that they want to make, and they feel good about making that decision. Another one that you might be familiar with is social stories. Social stories explain appropriate social behaviors in the form of concrete visual cues, and this is in the form of photos or illustrations of the specific situation that make information more digestible for folks who cannot visualize an image from verbal descriptions. That's something that I think some don't realize about ASD, is that there is it's very difficult for those on the spectrum to form a picture in their head. They have to have seen something in order to pull an image. And this isn't everyone, of course. This is, you know, there are some that their ASD manifests this way and some that don't. But for those that it does, they can't picture in their head how a situation will go. They just don't have the ability. So these social stories do a great job of showing them, hey, this is what this situation looks like in everyday life. So when they get to the situation, they have some kind of reference to go off of. And you can see the example of a social story at the side. I'm sorry, on the side, you know, everyone can play at the playground. If someone is on the swing, I don't push them off. I can say, can I sit on the swing next? Other kids like the swing too. I will wait for my turn. So just kind of giving them those very basic commands, but in a way that they understand in first person language, which I'll get into more detail on the next slide. So social stories should be in first person language. You know, I can do this. If I feel angry, I can do this. Very much making it their own so that they can own it. It needs to be at their reading level and focused on one item or event. More than that can be overwhelming. You don't want to say, I can do this at the park, I can do this at the museum, I can do this at the zoo. There needs to be a separate story per occurrence. And they're detailed and step by step. So like I said, it's basically like instructions, but in story format that they can own. And you might see this one over here in the bottom corner, going to college social narrative. So this is a great one for, you know, the transition from secondary education on, because it says, I may feel anxious about going to college, and that's completely normal, of course. I think everybody feels anxious about going to college. And then, you know, some other ones that might be there, like, I will have teachers here that are called professors, you know, just kind of like making sure that the connections are made and teaching those skills on how to operate at a different level than they've been expected to operate before. So social stories are really good for that. So the next one we're going to talk about, the next objective we're going through, is new skills and locations. And this phrase in and of itself can be a little nerve-wracking for those on the spectrum. And the reason being, it could cause disruption to the routine. So new skills can be taught with the use of graduated exposure, like we talked about at the very beginning, and more visual aids. So some visual aids that may help with new skills, like we've talked about, are social stories, task lists, and video modeling. we've already talked about social stories, so we won't go over that again, but a task list is something that I suggested using earlier in the new location example, which we can go over again. But task lists break down skills into small manageable tasks. As you can see on list, it's labeled list 4, wipe chairs, fold towels, empty dishwashers. This is kind of like a chore list, it seems like. But task lists are more very specific, like getting the mail, go outside to your mailbox, open the mailbox. Just that kind of very easy language. There's nothing, they're not expected to interpret anything. It is just as it is. You show completion of each step, as this one does right here. And this one kind of does too. It shows a little bit of the illustration here. And then you should be matched, or I'm sorry, the task list should be matched to their learning style. That should probably go with any visual aid. They need to be, age appropriate and level appropriate as well. And so task lists encourage the fading of prompts, and you would also assist with that. So if you give them a task list, then they're going to do that on their own, and you may have to give them verbal prompts through it. So you may say, if they say, go outside to your mailbox, they may say, where's the mailbox? And so you may have to, say it's down here at the end of the driveway, and you may have to walk through it with them at first. You probably will have to walk through it with them at first. And then after you're done with that, you do the next step. But then once they do it the first time, maybe the next time they need less verbal instruction, and the next time they need no verbal instruction. So it's just about fading out those prompts so that it just becomes a part of what they know how to do. And then video modeling. Video modeling is super effective, and that's evidence-based. Video modeling is just watching a video of someone modeling a behavior or skill. So experts say that if possible, it should be the actual child or person doing the video. So maybe you are walking them through how to do something on a task list, and you are videotaping them while they do it, but you want to try to make it look like they're doing it independently. So when they watch through the video again, then they can see themselves doing it, and that's a good motivator to keep doing it on their own. So you would talk through the video, giving instruction, using the same language as the task list, and then you would show the video several times throughout the day, not even just before they're supposed to do the activity or even just after. It's just all day. A lot of people love to watch videos now, and this is a great way to kind of put that little skill pocket in the middle of their day in a way that they enjoy. And then eventually you would fade supports or prompts. And what this means for video modeling is you would turn down the volume. You wouldn't, maybe when they first do it and they watch the video, they still need your out loud verbal prompts outside of the video and the video. And then the next time they may just need the video. And then you turn down the volume a little bit until you get to mute eventually, and they're just watching it and doing it on their own, and it becomes a part of what they know how to do, like I said. So new skills, some suggested activities for outdoor fun. Go for a walk at the park or around the neighborhood. I have an asterisk by the park because I want everyone to remember that new locations can be very overwhelming for those on the spectrum. So that's what those asterisks mean. And then fine and gross motor tasks, sidewalk chalk, kick or throw a ball, water play, swimming pool, public or backyard. Again, with the public asterisk, it's just because a public swimming pool could be overwhelming for those that are not on the spectrum, let alone those that are on the spectrum. And then, you could go to the playground if you have one in your backyard, or of course the park again. And then some indoor fun. So fine and gross motor tasks here too, drawing, Play-Doh, board games, just really depending on the age group and what they like to do. And then music can be relaxing or stimulating. So, you've got the calming music or the stimulating music where you're up and dancing and moving around. And then movement or exercise, stretching, yoga, walking, running. And then sensory activities can also be calming or stimulating, which we'll get to a little bit more when we get to sensory stuff. And then finally, new locations. So the best practices for new locations, like I said before, is that graduated exposure. If it's possible to drive by the location, I know sometimes we're going on vacation a few hours away and it's not possible just to do a drive-by. But if it is possible to drive by the location, do so. Utilize internet resources such as photos, and a lot of places now have virtual tours. If you don't have a computer at home or internet access, your local library would be happy to assist. You can also check out books about the location if they're available at your local library. Just depends on the location, like the Great Wall of China is going to have a lot of books in it because it's a very well-known location, but some others may not. So go to the location with absolutely no expectations. I know this is difficult when it comes to faraway vacation stuff, but I think with no expectations and just driving by, like say you get there and you're on vacation, going there tentatively, knowing that you may not be there for a while, just to have the person scope it out and get comfortable with it could lead to being able to go back and it working out. If that's not possible, of course, there are ways, for skills to soothe and things like that we'll get to soon. While you're there, use a step or task list. Like I said, keeps them focused and wanting to explore more so than feeling that anxiety of a new place. And time frames. If you let the individual know ahead of time how long you'll be at the location and what you will do there, it could really make things a lot smoother. As I said before, those on the spectrum, 9 times out of 10, if they have the information, there will be much less distress than if they do not know what's going on. So now to sensory play and activities. So sensory play, I don't know if you all have seen those fidget toys and just the different things that you can play with in your hands. I've got some examples here, but there is sensory toys for every age. And it doesn't matter necessarily, what kind of sensory toy it is, as long as the person likes it. So you can teach sensory regulation skills with these. And this is part of like the coping skills that you might use if there's a overwhelming place that you don't really have a choice about coming back and doing a slow introduction to. Making sure that they have these sensory regulation tools can help with that situation a lot. They can also be relaxing or stimulating. And did you know that sensory overload or dysregulation is a leading cause of meltdowns in folks on the spectrum? So we've all, I think we're all familiar with what a meltdown might look like, but what happens with the sensory is that they're upset from the sensory overload. They've taken in way too much information and there's nothing helping them calm down. Whereas if we have the sensory regulation, I'm going to call them toys. I don't mean that in an elementary way, but that's what they're called, the fidget toys. If you have those, that's a way to try to prevent that kind of distress. It's a way to teach them how to regulate their senses before it gets to the point where it's not manageable anymore. So some sensory activities that don't require the use of fidget toys or anything like that could be, calm music. This is the relaxing side. So calm music, swinging is very calming, drawing or using chalk, outside play of any kind, yoga or breathing exercises. Some stimulating, you really want to get blood flowing. You're going to want to do upbeat music or dancing. Swinging can also be not as calming, I guess. And then outside play, running or jumping on the trampoline, any kind of obstacle course. Really, the point of stimulating is just to get their heart pumping, get them really excited. And it really does help. I mean, it helps those that are not on the spectrum too to regulate. So of course, it could help those on the spectrum. And then finally, some travel safety tips. So travel is especially distressing a lot of times for those on the spectrum. It is similar to them facing a major change. So, and they really are facing a major change. If they have a routine and then, they're told, okay, we're going on vacation for 2 weeks in the summer, that's a huge change to their normal. So again, plan ahead and explain that plan to the person on the spectrum or your loved one. If it's, a child of yours, if they're a child of yours, give them information such as the travel time. How long is it going to take to get there? How many states do we have to go through to get there if we're driving? And then when food and restroom breaks will be. It's important to have those so that they have that to look forward to and as a break from the travel and from the anxiety of a new place. And then utilize visual aids such as schedules or calendars and social stories. We've gone over that. Show the individual pictures of the place you're visiting and all the things you will see if those pictures are available, of course. And be sure to bring familiar toys or comfort items, as well as sensory regulation toys or items as well. And then one important travel tip is TSA Cares, which is on the next slide. So the TSA has, as this says, a special helpline for those who travel with autism and medical conditions. And what it does is it kind of makes the process a little easier for those on the spectrum, because airports are overwhelming for a lot of people, and especially for those on the spectrum. So what the TSA Cares does is makes the security screening process a little less rigid, and it's just a little bit friendlier, I would say, than the normal TSA process, because they understand that the airport is an overwhelming experience. And all the information for that is right here on this slide. You just call the phone number about 72 hours before and explain, what your situation is, whether you have a child on the spectrum or an adult on the spectrum, and just give them the lowdown so that they can be prepared and make that process a lot easier and less distressing for the person with autism. So some other ideas, just as a bonus for some skill development this summer, if you have the time, is, a bedtime routine. They would choose their own bedtime, they would go to bed on their own, make their bed, that kind of thing. Morning routine, I guess they would make their bed in the morning. So morning routine, you would wake up on their own, they get dressed on their own, eat breakfast, brush teeth, and if they need the video modeling or any kind of visual aid support, then that would be provided in these instances. And then meal planning might be a fun one, because there's not a lot of need to leave unless you go to the grocery store. Grocery, again, is asterisk, because it could be an overwhelming experience for those on the spectrum. A lot of times it is very overwhelming to go to the grocery store. But having a grocery list and maybe doing a pickup order, or, you just go by yourself and bring it home, whatever it may be. So, meal planning, you could teach table manners and hand washing. Obviously, this is dependent on age and, the level of which they are able to do these activities. And then grocery list, so they can check things off the list as you get them online, if you do an online order, or if they are comfortable going in, of course, too. You want them to be looking at ingredients, local ads, specials, coupons, just really teaching them like what it's like to be an adult and order groceries and have to pick them up and make them. And of course, a lot of the folks that we are working with are actually adults and would benefit greatly from some of these skills if they didn't have them already. And then household chores, this is the basics: clean floors, laundry, make the bed, take out the trash. One that might be more fun for those on the spectrum would be changing light bulbs or batteries. I had noticed that a lot of the individuals I worked with really enjoy changing light bulbs and batteries, anything they can take apart and put back together. And then, of course, cleaning the bathroom.
Which everyone loves to do, right?
Oh, yeah, it's my favorite, of course.
Do we have any questions as we're moving along? Brittany, is anything popping up in the chat? I know we're covering a lot of stuff today. I just wanted to kind of pause for questions.
Anything pop up in the chat, but feel free. I know sometimes it takes a minute to type those out, so feel free to put those in there when you're able to.
Excellent. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt, Tanner. Go right ahead.
Oh, no problem. We always welcome questions. And then finally, other ideas for skill development this summer: restaurant skills. So restaurants, again, are potentially a very overwhelming experience for those on the spectrum. Just so much going on, so many social situations expected of them. So be aware of this as you enter into restaurant skills. If you would like to practice restaurant skills at home first, that would probably be a great example of kind of a social story in real life. You're practicing before you even get there, and you could even make a social story to bring with you. You could have a choice list to bring with you for food to alleviate some of that stress of choosing. But so what we would teach with the skills would be, ordering food, keeping conversation with those at the table if needed, and speaking politely to the waiter or waitress, or anybody for that matter at the establishment. It's also going to be teaching independence, ordering on your own, using the restroom alone, if age and cognitive level appropriate. Of course, we don't want any safety issues. And then table manners, And then a very one that a lot of kids in general and people in general kind of like to do as they're learning about money is handling the money, paying for the meal, calculating the waiter or waitress's tip. That's a lot of fun, especially if they like math, and calculating the amount of change they should receive, etc. Things like that. Just everything it takes to be in a restaurant. It looks like we might have a question in the Q&A.
So we do. One individual said, restaurants you spend 3 hours with menu dinner items is new after COVID-19. That's new experience. You will ask which Illinois restaurant lets you visit. There's been Applebee's menus in the past to get you an idea. And then another comment talks about in Illinois, when you get clearance on the same topics with human resources and with work comp versus system, not talking to the system, delaying disclosure. So a question really about disclosure and asking about that.
Okie dokie. I'm not sure that I understand the question. Would that person feel comfortable speaking up and letting us know what you meant by that?
For that main question, just really focusing on, COVID-19 and the pandemic and how things have changed, how restaurants even do business right now. I know you can go into some and you may not even engage with a person because they no longer have wait staff. You have to utilize electronics and your phone or a computer because the individuals are really focusing on the kitchen and getting everything ready. And so just addressing how those things have changed as well.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm with you. So I would definitely add that into the restaurant skills, and that may even be a better situation for those on the spectrum, I would say, because they're not forced into uncomfortable social situations in that realm. Of course, they will need social skills in general, but for that one, going to a restaurant doesn't require social skills, then I guess that'd probably be a lot easier for them.
Excellent. All right, I don't see any other questions, so let's wrap this next slide.
And then what we covered today, you all hung on with us, and I do appreciate it. We defined autism spectrum disorder and some of the little things that go along with that some folks on the spectrum might experience. We did some helpful hints for the transition to summer and looked at schedules, choice boards, and other visual aids. We talked about new skills and new locations and graduated exposure, how we get to those locations and have no expectations, and things like that. And then, of course, the safety tips for travel.
Excellent, thank you. So now we're going to open the floor up again for questions and discussion. Brittany, do we have any questions out there in our virtual world?
At this moment, but you are able to put those in the chat or Q&A feature, or if you have a working microphone, you can feel free to raise your hand and we will unmute you and give you the ability to answer your questions that way.
Excellent. So while you're all typing your questions and putting those together, I do want to just remind you that there are fantastic resources available on the Autism College and Career website. And I want to thank Tanner for doing an excellent job today. I know that some of the helpful hints that he had for our students and our children that are on the spectrum are also just helpful hints and good practices in general for having our students ready for summer, making it through summer. And then also there's going to be those same questions as we transition back into school. So that is once again a change in schedule. That is once again where we're looking at what can we do to make sure that that transition into school is seamless and appropriate and safe for our children. So if you want to look at this presentation through that lens of how do we start winding down, and I dare say we are at the point that we're winding down summer, but unfortunately we are getting to the end of July. And so I do encourage you to look at it in that route as well, not only for planning for summer vacations and planning for summer outings, but also for getting our students ready and well supported as they go back into the school. Any questions there? Not seeing any. I think we're at a good point to give you all back a little about 15 minutes back to your day. Any closing comments, Tanner?
No, just thank you everyone so much for hanging on with us and listening to all this information. We do appreciate you being here with us today.
Excellent. Thank you all. Have a great day and enjoy the sunshine today.